On March 19, 2026, Chuck Norris died in Hawaii. He was 86 years old. 9 days before that, on his birthday, he had posted a video of himself sparring with a boxing trainer, smiling, throwing punches, and writing that he was in good health and grateful for another year. His family described his passing as sudden. They asked for privacy. They said he was surrounded by the people he loved and that he was at peace. The internet did not wait. Within hours, tributes flooded in from every direction. President Trump called him a tough cookie and a great supporter. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said he electrified generations of conservatives. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called him a great friend of Israel. Sylvester Stallone said he was all-American in every way. Across social media, millions of people who grew up watching him kick bad guys through walls were suddenly sitting with something they could not quite name. A grief that felt bigger than losing an actor. Because Chuck Norris was never just an actor. And the people who understood that are asking a question that has been circling since the news broke. Not about how he died, about what he actually stood for, what he was willing to say out loud in a town built on silence, and why the system that should have celebrated him spent the last 2 decades doing everything it could to make him irrelevant. To understand that question, you have to go further back than Hollywood. You have to understand what the devil's plan actually looks like when it operates in the real world, and what it costs a man to look directly at it and refuse to flinch. What Chuck Norris saw, and what happened to him for seeing it, is not a story most people have been told straight. The man who was not supposed to exist, Carlos Ray Norris, was born in Ryan, Oklahoma in 1940. His father was a World War II veteran who came home broken, became an alcoholic, and left. His mother raised Chuck and his 2 brothers on almost nothing. He was shy as a kid, unathletic, no plan. Nothing about his childhood pointed toward anything. At 18, he joined the Air Force, got stationed in South Korea, and discovered Tang Soo Do. He came back, opened a karate school, and started teaching. His students included Steve McQueen, Bob Barker, Priscilla Presley, and the Osmonds. McQueen told him to try acting. He took lessons, got a minor role in a 1968 film, and then Bruce Lee personally invited him to play the villain in The Way of the Dragon in 1972. Lee died the following year. Norris kept going. By 1968, he had won his first World Professional Middleweight Karate Championship. He defended that title 5 consecutive times before retiring undefeated in 1974. He was the first person ever inducted into the Black Belt Hall of Fame. He was the first man in the Western Hemisphere to receive 8th-degree Black Belt Grandmaster recognition in Taekwondo, a distinction not granted to anyone in 4,500 years of that tradition. Black Belt magazine eventually credited him with a 10th-degree Black Belt, the highest rank the discipline recognizes. He was a man who should not have existed by any standard measure. A poor kid from Oklahoma with no money, no connections, no athletic background, who built himself entirely from scratch using discipline as his only material. That story should have made him the perfect American symbol. For a while, it did. His run through the 1980s was extraordinary. Missing in Action, Invasion USA, Code of Silence, The Delta Force. Walker, Texas Ranger ran for 8 full seasons on CBS and became the most successful Saturday night television program since Gunsmoke, broadcasting in over 80 countries worldwide. Then the Chuck Norris fax meme exploded in 2005 and turned him into a global phenomenon all over again. He embraced it, published his own fact book, and laughed about it on every talk show that would have him. He was beloved. He was untouchable. He was also, quietly, doing something that was making the most powerful industry in the world deeply uncomfortable. And that discomfort would come for him in ways worth paying very close attention to. But before you can understand what the machine did to him, you need to understand where the machine actually came from. The devil's plan has a structure. The historical Illuminati was real. It was founded by a Bavarian professor named Adam Weishaupt on May 1st, 1776. At its peak, it had over 2,000 members across Europe, including intellectuals, political figures, and people with institutional access and influence. Its goal was to promote Enlightenment ideals, dismantle religious authority, and ultimately replace traditional institutions with what Weishaupt considered a more rational governing system. In 1785, the Bavarian government outlawed secret societies, and the organization was formally disbanded. The historical record shows no organized activity after that point. What survived was not the organization. What survived was the model. The idea that a small group of ideologically aligned people who share the same values, control the same money, and manage the same access points, could quietly reshape culture without ever announcing themselves became the operating template for every concentrated power structure that followed. You do not need secret meetings. You do not need ceremonies or symbols or oaths. You just need shared incentives and shared silence. When everyone at the decision-making level wants the same outcome, the outcome happens without anyone issuing a single order. That is what the modern version of the plan actually looks like. Not men in robes. A machine. In Hollywood, that machine is documented and verifiable. 6 media conglomerates control the overwhelming majority of what the world watches and hears. The same small cluster of studios decides which films get made and which get shelved. The same awards bodies decide which stories are worth celebrating and which are allowed to quietly expire. The same agencies represent the same talent and decide who gets submitted for which roles and who simply never gets the call. None of this is secret in the sense of being unknown. It is secret in the sense that it never announces its criteria. It never holds a public vote on whose career gets killed. It never leaves fingerprints. You cannot point to the decision. You can only observe the pattern. And the pattern applied to people who hold the wrong values inside that machine is as consistent as gravity. In 2017, ABC canceled Tim Allen's show Last Man Standing despite strong ratings. Allen was an outspoken conservative. James Woods publicly stated he had been blacklisted for his political views. Antonio Sabato Jr. said his career ended after he spoke at the Republican National Convention. Robert Davey said the same. Kelsey Grammer said being openly conservative in Hollywood leads to professional hurdles and social exclusion. Jon Voight, an Academy Award winner, said conservative voices were being actively suppressed. These are not fringe figures making fringe claims. These are working professionals with decades of documented careers describing the same pattern from different angles at different times. The organization formed specifically to protect conservative Hollywood figures from this machine was called Friends of Abe. It was a secret society, actually secret. Members were required to keep their involvement private because being publicly identified could end a career. At its peak, it had between 1,500 and 1,800 members. Nearly 2,000 people working inside the most powerful entertainment industry in the world felt they needed a covert organization to protect themselves from professional punishment for their beliefs. That is not paranoia. That is a documented institutional reality. In Christian theology, the devil does not usually operate through dramatic spectacle. He operates through systems, through the slow, nearly invisible shifting of what is acceptable and what is not, through the quiet removal of platforms from people who say the wrong things in the wrong rooms, through the gradual building of consensus until the person who refuses to comply finds themselves standing alone in a space that used to be full. Chuck Norris walked into that space with his eyes open, and he stood there for 30 years without moving. What he refused to do, the thing that separated Chuck Norris from almost every other conservative voice in Hollywood, was that he never played it safe. Not once. He started writing a weekly column for WorldNet Daily in October 2006, and he never stopped. He pushed publicly for the Bible to be brought back into public schools. He lobbied for prayer in schools. He worked with the National Council on Bible Curriculum to get certified Bible courses into public high schools across the country. He endorsed Republican presidential candidates by name and appeared in their campaign ads. He served as honorary chairman of the Trigger the Vote campaign for the NRA. He promoted Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ in a town where that was considered professional suicide. He published Black Belt Patriotism: How to Reawaken America. In 2009, he said directly that many actors try to be happy, but you can see that they are not, and that they will never fill that void until they find their faith. He was talking about people he worked beside. He was describing the machine from the inside. But the most important thing he ever built was not a film and not a column. In 1990, he founded the Kickstart Kids program with the help of President George H.W. Bush. The program brought martial arts instruction directly into public middle schools in Houston, weaving karate together with character-building curriculum designed specifically for at-risk students. He called it the most rewarding accomplishment of his life, more than any championship, any box office number, any television rating. Since it launched, more than 120,000 students have gone through it. A Tarrant County sheriff said publicly that Kickstart Kids had prevented more crime and freed up more prison space than any initiative he had seen in 35 years of law enforcement. A man chasing celebrity does not build that. A man who understood that real impact happens far from cameras builds that. The machine took notice. As his faith became more vocal and his positions sharper, major film roles dried up. By the time he appeared in The Expendables 2 in 2012 alongside Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis, it read like a nostalgic cameo because that is precisely what the industry had decided it was going to be. He had not declined as a performer. He was still training every day into his 80s. He still had the discipline and the presence. What he no longer had was an industry willing to build him new platforms. And right around the time his film career went quiet, something more subtle happened. Something more destructive than rejection. He got turned into a joke. If this kind of deep dive is what you came here for, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. When the weapon is laughter, the Chuck Norris facts meme started in 2005. Absurdist jokes about his invincibility spread worldwide. He embraced the whole thing, published a fact book, laughed about it on talk shows, and let the meme become part of his public identity. On the surface, this looked like a man comfortable enough in his own skin to laugh at himself. And that is part of what it was. But there is a second layer to what that meme accomplished that almost nobody talks about. When a person becomes a meme, especially one built around the idea that they are a cartoonish, superhuman, mythological figure, their actual ideas stop being taken seriously. The meme replaces the man. You no longer need to engage with what Chuck Norris thinks about education, faith, or the direction of the country. Chuck Norris becomes the guy whose tears cure cancer. The substance gets swallowed by the spectacle. This is one of the cleanest tools the machine has when it cannot silence someone outright. You do not argue with them. You do not discredit their ideas through debate. You make them funny. You make them into a character. And then when they say something serious, the laughter reflex fires before the thinking reflex does, and the message never lands. It is worth asking who benefits from an outspoken Christian conservative with millions of fans being known primarily as a punchline about roundhouse kicks. The machine did not fire Chuck Norris. It did not threaten him or take anything by force. It turned him into a meme, dried up his major film work, and then waited. While it was waiting, he kept training, kept writing, kept funding Kickstart Kids, kept showing up at every platform willing to have him. On March 10th, 2026, 9 days before he died, he posted a video of himself boxing at age 86 and wrote, "I do not age, I level up." He was still there, still refusing to go quietly. What the devil never counted on here is what makes Chuck Norris different from every person the machine successfully erased. He left things behind that the machine cannot touch. Kickstart Kids is still running. It operates in over 58 schools across Texas right now. Students who were born decades after his peak career years are learning discipline and self-worth through a program he built before most of them were alive. That program will outlast any film he ever made. It will outlast the meme. It will outlast every dismissive piece written the day after his death to complicate his legacy. The columns, the books, the interviews, all documented. His beliefs are on the record in his own voice across 50 years of public life. You can read them. You can decide what you think, but you cannot pretend they do not exist. And you cannot pretend they do not represent a complete, considered worldview that the mainstream cultural machine has never been able to fully contain. His last public words were about gratitude, faith, and being exactly where he wanted to be. There was no last-minute softening of his positions, no apology to the industry for holding the wrong beliefs. He was Chuck Norris until the last morning. The devil's plan, the real one, the documented one, built not on supernatural mythology but on institutional power and cultural consensus, requires compliance to function. It requires people to decide that access is worth more than honesty, that comfort is worth more than conviction, that being invited to the table is worth whatever you have to leave at the door to get there. Chuck Norris never walked through that door. He stood outside it for 30 years, said exactly what he believed at full volume, built something real with his hands that will outlive the people who tried to reduce him, and died without giving the machine a single thing it wanted from him. The meme still gets shared. The dismissive pieces still get written. The machine is still running. But 120,000 kids learned something true from something he built, and he died with his name on it. Subscribe if this is the kind of content you want more of. See you in the next one.